Hello, I'm John Janarone, editor-in-chief of IPO Edge. Very happy to be back today with GameSquare. We actually interviewed this company a couple years ago. It has transformed pretty significantly since then. This is a business that helps brands and publishers, like video game publishers, reach that really, really tough to find audience of Gen Z, the younger crowd that likes esports and gaming, which is an absolutely enormous industry. We're going to talk more about that. We also are going to talk about the acquisition of FaZe Clan, which is the biggest name in gaming, and the fact that the company recently hired Chief Innovation Officer Ninja, who is the biggest influencer in gaming. Okay, but before we dig into that, I just want to name who we've got on stage here. We have three gentlemen from the company. We have the CEO, who's Justin Kenna. We have President Lou Schwartz, and we have the head of FaZe Esports, Eric Anderson. Before we meet the three of them, I'd like to remind everyone today, we encourage you to ask questions. The easiest way is to do that in the Zoom portal right there, and we'll get to those towards the end of the show. And then finally, we'll get a replay up later this afternoon if you're not able to watch the whole thing, understanding it's the middle of the day. With that, I'm going to pass the baton to Jarrett Banks, editor-at-large, who's going to introduce the guests.
Great, thanks, John. Justin, welcome to the program. Perhaps we'll start with you. Tell us, what is GameSquare and what problem does it solve, and what's the market opportunity here?
Yeah, thanks for having me. GameSquare is a next generation media company that is connecting game publishers and tier one brands with the huge and ever growing gaming and esports communities. We're really helping sort of navigate and understand this new consumer for these brands and game publishers. I think something that many may not know or realize is really truly how fragmented these huge audiences are. The audiences are real and they're growing, but they're very hard to reach. And so we are at the forefront from an end-to-end platform perspective and in really helping game publishers and brands connect directly with this large and growing audience.
Very exciting. Tell us about your overarching business model and how is it unique?
Yeah, absolutely. It is unique. It's interesting, right? People obviously ask you all the time about competitors. And I think from an end-to-end standpoint, we really don't have a competitor. I think within our three business units, we do. But it gives us a huge competitive advantage by having this sort of end-to-end offering and really being able to help brands and publishers sort of navigate this space. So those three business units, as you really think about GameSquare, software as a service. Lou Schwartz, who you mentioned, who is the president of GameSquare, oversees our technology assets. So you'll hear a little bit more from him on this part of the business in a bit more of a deep dive. Obviously, a nice part of the business from a public company standpoint, revenue while you sleep. And as we start to really get to scale, hopefully start to see some better multiples in this space. Our SaaS business, within that, we have Stream Hatchet, which is really the de facto market leader when it comes to data in the space. Sidekick, which is our end-to-end influencer platform, attribution, distribution, and with the amount of talent that we work with, not only in-house but also externally, obviously a huge competitive advantage having that internally, and managed services. That's really bundled up in our software as a service business unit. Our second business unit, we have a full service creative agency. So they're doing content and campaigns, strategy work for brands. You're trying to sort of once they figure out the demographic they're trying to reach, really building out strategy for them to reach that audience really authentically. And we have sort of a media and placement business within our creative agency. So not only are we going to these brands, building out strategy, placing influencers internally and so forth, but we're also guaranteeing them a certain level of engagement and click-through our own media network. So keeping revenue in-house, expanding margin, and so forth. And then finally, which I think differentiates us probably the most out of the three business units, is our owned and operated IP. So we have our own content and IP that we build out, our own experiences or events business, and where we were able to pull off some of the biggest events in gaming to date. We had the Tatman Tailgate, which had 9,000 people through the doors, a 2-day gaming and music festival. Ninja's New Year's Eve, you guys mentioned Ninja briefly at the start. There's a part of sort of the C-suite here at GameSquare, but really owning that 6 hours of time at New Year's Eve where kids are really online and communicating and gaming, They're not sitting at home watching the ball drop in Times Square anymore. So we had a really successful event there that we're going to take on the road and grow. We've got a couple of really exciting pieces that we'll be sort of announcing pretty soon in that part of our business. And then the two pieces of our owned and operated IP that again give us huge differentiation in this end-to-end offering is FaZe Esports, where you'll hear from Eric Anderson shortly, who runs our esports business. I mean, arguably the number one esports org in the world, with our Counter-Strike team, our Halo team, who recently won the major in London, the Call of Duty team through Atlanta FaZe, and so forth. So Eric will give you guys a deeper dive there, but obviously gives us direct access to large audience in the space. And then finally, FaZe Media, which we just recently announced, which again gives it further differentiation. I mean, some of the biggest channels in gaming, and really excited by what we're working on there with some of the biggest talent in gaming. But yeah, the three business units being software as a service, our full service creative agency, and our owned and operated IP from an end-to-end offering really differentiates us and gives us huge competitive advantage.
Great. Now, your revenue has grown tremendously. Can you explain a little bit about your execution, your results to date, and tell us a little bit about what the FaZe Clan merger means for future growth?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, I think that many out there listening would understand the challenges that sort of micro cap markets have presented over the past few years. I'm extremely proud by the way we've been able to navigate those markets, especially if you look in a lot of categories, you see brand and ad spend retracting. So I think the revenue growth is even more impressive, and we're really starting to see that turn. We've got a really strong pipeline, and we are continuing to execute on that front. We came out to market and gave an indication of sort of top line of 100 million plus in revenue, which I think if you look at our market cap today, around 40 million presents a lot of value. Not only sort of the revenue growth, but we've been really controlling costs and getting the business into really good shape. So I think that's a trend to look for, especially with the close of the FaZe deal and that integration is we can control cost and we've been removing a lot of costs. We're quoted as saying 18 million in annual costs from the FaZe deal. We're well on the way there, so I'd expect over our Q2 and Q3 results to see a lot of cost improvement while we're really striving to hit that 100 million in revenue. So really proud of the way we've navigated, and I think good segue into the FaZe deal because sort of challenging markets do present opportunities, and I think that we've been pretty aggressive on the M&A front. So I think that revenue growth is a really nice mix of organic growth, but also through acquisition. And I think that that's really going to put us in good stead as rate cuts come through and markets start to turn. That aggressive nature in acquisition through tough times. I mean, FaZe is a great example, right? FaZe Clan was an entity through a SPAC deal that went public. They were listed on NASDAQ less than 18 months ago under the stock ticker FaZe. We're trading north of $1 billion, and we were able to acquire them for $14 million of stock. So, we think that there's huge upside there. FaZe has access to the largest audience in gaming if you look across their platforms, and I think with our infrastructure that we've built to be able to plug into FaZe, there's a huge amount of upside. And something that I kind of point to as a really great roadmap is Complexity Gaming. So we acquired Complexity Gaming, who are a competitor of FaZe, sort of far smaller in terms of overall reach, but a competitor all the same. We acquired Complexity less than 3 years ago. As part of that sort of transaction, it was an all-stock deal. At the time, Complexity was doing around 3 million in revenue, burning around 8 million annually. Within a 3-year time frame, we grew audience by 10x through our media data agency infrastructure plugin. And we took that from roughly 3 million revenue to around 12 million revenue, from an 8 million burn to break even. And so I think it's a really great roadmap for the GameSquare infrastructure and what we can bring to FaZe Clan, which, as I mentioned, has a far bigger reach and audience. So yeah, we're really bullish about where we can take this quickly.
All right, great. I want to bring Lou Schwartz, the president of GameSquare, into the discussion. Lou, what are GameSquare's key tech assets, and how have they grown in significant over the last couple of years after key acquisitions?
Yeah, thanks, Jared. Well, I think sort of Justin sort of highlighted earlier, right? Our software platforms are really comprised of sort of two components. One is Stream Hatchet, and the other is Sidekick. So Stream Hatchet is a business sort of intelligence and data insight sort of platform. We integrate into all the major live streaming platforms. So think about sort of Nielsen for TV. We're basically sort of the Nielsen sort of for live streaming gaming. And this is, believe it or not, a big audience sort of globally. 600 or 700 million people today watch other people game through these various endpoints, right? Whether it's Twitch or YouTube or Meta. We're really sort of the category leader here because we cover about 20 global platforms. We abstract data, and then we license it to probably 9 of the top 10 largest game publishers in the world, right? These game publishers, they want to know, right, what influencers are driving what audience, right? What the audience engagement is by day part. What's the sort of the content performance? What are the market trends? I mean, the information that we provide is really sort of mission critical today, right, for game publishers and brands alike. Brands that activate within these various games, they want to know, right, how many people are actually sort of seeing their logo, whether it's inside of Fortnite or Call of Duty. If Samsung is advertising, they want to know how many people are actually seeing, right, that ad through these various platforms. And so the earned media value for the influencer that's driving that traffic is really important, right, for game publishers and brands alike. And that brings us sort of to the second platform, Sidekick. So Sidekick is, so once you have all the data insights and business intelligence, how do you activate influencers and creators and brand ambassadors, which today contribute 50 to 60% of global revenue to these game publishers. So game publishers are generating 50 to 60% of their revenue through the instigation or recommendation of influencers or creators or brand ambassadors, right? So being able to search and find and connect and be able to communicate on a regular basis at scale is super important, right, for game publishers. And it provides a real sweet spot for us because, one, many of these game publishers are already customers of Stream Hatchet, right? So being able to cross-sell these additional capabilities is something sort of that is just naturally purpose-built into our platform and strategy.
Great. Now, you touched on it a little bit, but how do these assets amplify the growth of GameSquare's business model?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, listen, we eat our own dog food is basically what I tell people with regard to the data and insights that we generate off Stream Hatchet from a top of the funnel sales and marketing perspective. We know all the brands, right, that are active within these various streaming platforms, right? So from a prospecting perspective, it's a fantastic data resource for us when we to identify game publishers that are active, up and coming games, influencers and creators that are adding sort of registrations on a regular basis. So we have sort of an early view, through our signaling as to what games are performing best, what influencers are driving what audience. And so from a targeting perspective, it's a great sort of top of the funnel resource for us. Similarly, it's also a great bottom of the funnel resource, right? Because brands and game publishers that are running campaigns, through these various social platforms, they want to know how the brands perform. What's the ROI, right? There's no longer sort of this notion of just spray and pray among advertisers and sponsors. They want real, tangible information, attribution data, performance, ROI, which is information that we can uniquely provide and really differentiates GameSquare as an end-to-end sort of marketing platform.
Great. Now, you mentioned the data, which is extremely valuable. How does AI play a role and help you scale?
Listen, we're a big data provider, right? So having data and having the ability to sort of parse through sort of data using AI tools enables us to be more efficient and more productive and be able to deliver information in a real sort of streamlined way. So imagine we have billions and billions of data records. In the past, customers had to parse through that data by creating targeted queries. You query the data, and the data sort of returns information. With AI, now you sort of speak, right, verbally to information that you're seeking, and the information sort of returns in a much more sort of efficient way. So that's one way that AI or these large language models can benefit from this sort of raw data that we sort of manage, and then we abstract today through our software as a SaaS platform. The other way is through sort of video and logo detection. So today we analyze every sort of live stream, and we do logo detection. So for example, if a brand is activating natively within a game, the game publisher knows what their install base is, right? So they're selling against their install base. What they don't know is how many people ultimately see that brand sort of logo through these different streaming endpoints. We provide sort of all that information. Through AI, we're able to do logo detection. We're able to identify how many people actually saw a particular ad, and then impute that earned media value back to the influencer or creator that's driving across these different channels, which is immensely valuable, right, to the sponsor sales folks within these native game publishing sales organizations.
Great. This is really cutting edge stuff here. I want to bring Eric Anderson into the discussion. Eric is the head of FaZe Esports. Eric, for people who don't know about esports, give us an overview and the market opportunity.
Yeah, look, can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Perfect. So look, esports is often a misunderstood kind of space, but the best way of comparing it to is like the traditional entertainment industry. The sports and live entertainment layer sits right on top of that in a very specific way. And so esports is a very clear, specific part of the gaming space that's focused on live entertainment and focused on filling stadiums, focused on media rights around that, and then starts to get into kind of the digital item sales and the other sort of revenue streams that exist on top of a layer of a video game. So not all games have esports inherently built in. Some communities have like kind of forced esports into it by virtue of pure competitive play. But it really is something that a lot of publishers have now started kind of moving more into. Kind of when MMOs were a big deal, a lot of people try to put an MMO out there. Now esports is a big deal in competitive play. Kind of that online, always on, free to play kind of model is kind of driving a lot of these kind of games out there. Some mobile games, some PC games, some console games. So the biggest in the States are games like Call of Duty. Internationally, games like PUBG Mobile or Mobile Legends Bang Bang, and a few of those type of titles, but not necessarily played in the States. And then, yeah, the market weight, it's basically anybody that wants to play a competitive video game globally. And every single day, more and more users are getting added on. Like I said, because of mobile, the player base is massive. Doesn't mean that every single esports title is playable worldwide. Like, we're very big in a game called Counter-Strike, and unless you have a PC of a certain quality, you're not playing that game, right? So there's certain parts of the world where it's just not well played. But at the same time, I'd argue there's majority of the world doesn't play the NFL, doesn't make it less valuable. It doesn't play American football. I mean, it doesn't make it less valuable. So that's kind of the marketplace. I can't give you a hard number because it's growing daily.
Great. Can you talk about the potential of FaZe in the longer term, and why is it so well positioned?
Yeah, look, one of the things that we kind of think about a lot in the United States is we have very locked in brands to specific leagues, right? You've got the Yankees that dominate baseball. You've got the Cowboys that dominate in football in terms of brand value. You go pretty much everywhere else around the world. You get a Barcelona or Real Madrid, and they have a very, very big football team or soccer club, but they also play netball, they play basketball, and they basically can ride the wave of whatever is kind of a growing ecosystem. Obviously in Europe, that's predominantly soccer, but also basketball. And perfect example is we got Luka playing in the finals right here. He was the MVP for the Real Madrid team back over there. So, filling out stadiums. We have a unique proposition too, in that we can kind of also surf whatever games are hot. Right. So we can compete in Counter-Strike when it's hot. We can compete in Call of Duty. If there's another game that breaks the internet, like for us 5-6 years ago, it was Fortnite, right? Well, we were there right at the front of Fortnite, riding that wave up as well. And there'll be another Fortnite, right? You go back in time, Halo dominated, then Call of Duty dominated, and then Fortnite dominated, right? They're still around, they're still doing their thing, but there's definitely a zeitgeist moment. And we are pretty good at being there when that zeitgeist moment is happening. And so the next esport title that takes over, that kind of captures the audience of the world, we're in a really good position to be there, not only from the audience perspective, but from a publisher perspective, in that we've got a big audience. So if you want to make sure you've got the biggest teams and you've got the most eyeballs as a part of your league out the gates, you want us to be a part of it. And so we can make sure that we're there in the door. And as you guys see with some of these valuations, some of these leagues, at a certain point, the door is open until it's not. And then when the door closes, everything kind of shoots up. And I would argue that, esports is continuing to scale and the door is still semi-open, but one day it's going to close. And when it closes, the seats at the table are going to be incredibly valuable.
It makes a lot of sense. How do you monetize the fame of FaZe?
Yeah. So, we're in a pretty unique position in the luxury that, the brand itself was originally founded by a group of creators, right? And so they came from the, playing the internet and eyeballs and attention side, and then moved over into competitive, where many of the other teams we compete with are competitive and then have added on that other layer of creator. And so we're at the luxury of a built-in audience when we came out. And then obviously with with the amount of wins and everything that we do, we continue to gain more audience. Now, once you have that audience, you can convert in a typical sports way, right? Which is, merchandise. Ticket sales are a unique one because we operate in leagues where it basically distributes kind of media value and tickets. But a unique one for esports and for gaming is the digital item sales. So that's basically when you play a game like Counter-Strike or Call of Duty and you have a gun skin or you have an emblem or you have some sort of sticker, and it's a digital item that you apply in game or on your weapon in some capacity. And that's an extremely robust business for us, but also one where, similar to everything else, it's only going to scale. It's only going to get bigger. It only has been getting bigger for us every single year. So it's somewhere where, if you get that right game that come along, or if, like, for example, Ready Player One becomes reality, right? And the whole globe is playing one game, then having a recognizable IP that's in there that everybody goes to watch is extremely valuable. And so we're seeing that, and we're hoping it continues to scale linearly. But if it exponentially scales at one point, I'm not going to be very surprised. So it's going to be, for me, a fun ride for that. But I think that's really kind of how you capitalize on it, is you have a hot brand, but you have a recognizable brand, right? You go back to the 90s or 2000s and you walk out Japan or somewhere else and everybody's got a Yankees hat on, right? And, the last few years, everybody's got a Golden State Warriors jersey or a LeBron jersey, wherever team he's on. And so I think that capacity to be able to reach global, which we're already in a lot of different countries with our teams, but to be able to continue to do that is something that we're pretty much in a class of our own, or very few other competitors.
Very cool. I want to bring John, my colleague, back into the discussion, and we'll take questions from the audience.
All right, great. Thanks, Jared. Let's grab one question here. Just came in from Casper. So Casper is asking about something that Justin went into, which is basically the 3 different revenue groups. Justin, can you just drill down slightly more for him, or anyone else can answer, which is the biggest in terms of revenue right now, and do they have different sort of growth profiles looking out ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can take that. So they do. I would think about, we kind of talked high level around that $100 million number. I would think about that in terms of sort of the SaaS business making up around 10 to 15% of that. So bucket number one. I think the question was also in relation to recurring revenue.
Yeah.
The great part about that is that 10 to 15% is very high margin, and it's very high recurring revenue. We've got a great sort of retention rate there. And that's an area that, again, we think will continue to really grow and scale. The second one being our full service creative agency. That's sort of around 35 to 40%. And similar in category 3, it's kind of owned and operated IP. So I think that, our owned and operated IP is probably more 40 to 45%. Our full service agencies, a little under that. But similarly, I think our owned and operated IP has a larger base there of recurring revenue. Our agency business, the second one, we're getting there, right? We're pretty early on in that agency life cycle. It's really kind of year 4. So we have a number of repeat business and retainer work, but also, there's still a good amount within there of competing for RFPs and so forth. But I think that the model that we have really gives us an advantage when we are competing for RFPs with other agencies. The fact that, we have not only gaming, but, athlete and celebrity talent in-house, we have data in-house, we have content and so forth. So, I think that end-to-end offering really puts us in good stead when competing for RFPs. But I would say overall, the mix of the business, around 60 to 70% of recurring revenue. So a really healthy, solid recurring revenue base through our programmatic media business, through our SaaS business and so forth. I would say probably the agency bucket number 2 is the largest amount of kind of new revenue. But we are taking a lot of these RFP wins and translating them into longer term relationships, really executing well and starting those agency of record conversations. So certainly an area that we hope to get more recurring revenue. And that's probably the largest growth area of our business, is that second bucket that we see as representing a lot of upside. And obviously in bucket number 3, I think the growth of FaZe Media also represents a lot of sort of material growth.
Great. If we can, gentlemen, let's step back for a second. Perhaps this is for slightly older viewers who might not be familiar with, the popularity of people watching other people play video games. Tell us just a bit more about that and how Ninja fits into it. So how long do people watch these games for? And are they watching people compete? Or are they also just watching people talk about how they're playing? I know it's kind of a simple question, but maybe Justin, for people who aren't that familiar with how this works.
Yeah, I can kick off there, and obviously Eric or Lou, feel free to jump in. It's funny. I give this sort of example a little bit. Jerry Jones is our biggest shareholder, so we're lucky enough to be able to host some of our investors at some Cowboys games. And I was talking to an investor and kind of giving the example. Dak Prescott was there. He's playing in front of 100,000 people. But it's pretty crazy, right? Some of these really high-end streamers are doing the same on a Monday afternoon from their bedroom. So it is really interesting. I think the example around people always ask why are kids watching other kids play video games? They don't understand it. It's the same as you go to an NBA game, you go to a Laker game in LA, and it's even more compelling for a brand though, right? Because within that audience, there's a pretty small percentage that's probably ever played basketball competitively, and an even smaller percentage who's actively playing it still at this time. If you look at these kids that are gaming, they're watching their heroes do it, and they're picking up tips, and they're so engaged because they're all gamers. They're watching others do it. I think an even additional sort of added layer there is you're a Laker game, but you don't get to communicate with LeBron. Whereas, you might be watching Ninja or, one of your favorite gamers, and you're giving them a donation and you're getting a shout out. And it's extremely engaging. So I think that's a pretty sort of good analogy for those that are a bit more familiar with traditional sport on sort of the power to brands on not only the eyeballs, but the true engagement level, given that these kids are all gaming and communicating online. In terms of Ninja, we're extremely excited to have Ninja a part of the GameSquare family. Obviously a bit more of a sort of unique approach, having him in our C-suite as a chief innovation officer. I think it's been hugely successful. We don't try to sort of fit people into things that aren't organic to them. Ninja's very entrepreneurial, really interested in the business side of things, and that's been great. We've done a couple of TV interviews together. We did our first ever earnings call live on Twitch with Ninja, which I think was really innovative and really cool, and launched Ninja Labs, which has been really successful. Ninja's been at the forefront of a number of large brand deals that we've done, and we've got a few really exciting things in the work. So it is a little bit of a hybrid relationship in the fact that obviously he is a large talent, and we are sort of launching and monetizing different opportunities with him. but also really leveraging his expertise and know-how, right? Like when communicating with brands on really what's happening in the creator economy, there's no better sort of microphone than coming straight from the guy who really helped build a lot of it in the first place. So yeah, been really successful, and we love working with Ninja.
Great. And for also folks who aren't familiar exactly with how brands reach an audience through a video game, I love these examples of McDonald's, MasterCard, a couple of other really big ones. How can you explain how that works? How those brands become part of the game for people who haven't played them before or seen it?
Yeah, we have a really interesting part of our business in our full service creative agency that really specializes in UEFN, which is Unreal Engine, which really, for those, I'm sure there's a lot of listeners who are familiar with Fortnite, and Fortnite really, changed the game in a lot of ways. And what Epic Games has been able to do with Fortnite, I think, is really interesting, right? Which is taking Fortnite from the game to actually a platform. And creating an opportunity for creators and brands to create their own maps within the game. And they've set up a really sort of interesting way of monetizing and incentivizing creators to drive audience to their specific maps and games within Fortnite. So we've really been specializing in building out custom maps for brands. You mentioned a couple there. Samsung is another. We have a few sort of really exciting brands in the pipeline, and it's just another sort of I think creative and immersive way for brands to be able to authentically connect with this audience. We talk about being a next generation media company. I actually think this map building business is a really good example of that. It's ways for brands to really authentically connect with the audience. And we've been able to sit really at the forefront of that and work with a number of tier one brands on creating out really custom maps and ways for them to drive, fan engagement and growth.
Now, is that engagement all within the game, or are there ever times when you can actually, I don't know, win something that's a physical prize or something like that, where I might be able to go get a soda or something from McDonald's? You guys ever do things like that, or is it predominantly within the game, the experience?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a number of ways of being able to integrate in marketing. We actually had a really cool activation with Jack in the Box, where you could be streaming online, and you go to the Jack in the Box channel, and you're actually at a digital drive-through, and you can order through a special code your Jack in the Box, and you're still there continuing to stream and game, and all of a sudden your Jack in the Box arrives at your house, and you've got your fuel to keep you going and continue gaming. So yeah, a number of really interesting ways of being able to connect with audience through through these different platforms, whether it's through our creative campaign businesses or our Unreal Engine and map building businesses. I think we're really sitting at that intersection of new media.
Great. And maybe we'll bring Eric back in here. There are a variety of different influencers who you guys work with. So we talked about Ninja. I don't think that Ninja's competing so much now. He goes and he talks, and he does his thing, and he's the most popular streamer out there. But you also have teams, right, Eric? So just, I think a couple of weeks ago, you guys competed in Fortnite in Dallas. How are those guys different from someone like Ninja, for people who aren't that familiar?
Yeah. So Dallas is an interesting event, something called DreamHack, which started off as a kind of bring your own computer party where you just go and game with a bunch of friends in a hall somewhere, and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. That actual event was our Counter-Strike team competed, actually, and a Tekken player of ours competed to try to qualify into something called the Esports World Cup, which is taking place over in Riyadh. So to questions of kind of global growth, right? This is happening over in Saudi Arabia. The pros, what's really interesting is many of the biggest streamers, not all of them, many of the biggest streamers come from esports, right? And they come from traditional competitive gaming, and then they've kind of transitioned on. Something that you've seen a lot more in with modern day podcasts, right? Where some of the biggest podcasts are being carried by ex-NFL players, ex-NBA players, et cetera. And actually coming back to one of the first questions you had with regards to kind of walking through why a lot of people are tuning in to watch these people play, it's a mixture of their previous like competitive peak, like they were some of the best in the world that played that certain game. So Ninja, for example, was a Halo player. Most people know him as a Fortnite player, but actually he was one of the best Halo players in the world. And that's his history back when Halo was a big game. And so the thing that I can compare it to the traditional sports world is if you go back in time enough, now it's podcasting, but back in the day it was shock jocks and guys like Howard Stern. And I'll be honest, to me, for the life of me, I cannot explain to people why people loved Howard Stern so much. Just like you're sitting to talking to your kid or somebody else, why do you like so-and-so so much? It's shared experiences. It's talking about things that you care about. It's walking through the zeitgeist moment and carrying yourself through. Howard was just really good at it for decades, right? And so some of these people might be too, but I think that's the best comparison I give you. Or going back to the sports talk radio, right? You tune in daily to hear through the things that you're talking about with your friend at your local bar, right? Or for some of these kids that they're talking about at school the next day. And you want to capture that moment so that you can go the next day to talk about it. And I think that's the best way of comparing some of these kind of streamers tied in. And the other subsection of that is that the esports, like the people that are streaming the top esport titles, by and large, 90% of them are the biggest streamers, right? So they're playing Rainbow Six, or they're playing Counter-Strike, or they're playing Fortnite. They're playing all these games that are the biggest esport titles. So yeah.
Gotcha.
Anyway, yeah. So we've got a lot of games in there, and those guys are just competitive. They're just the best in the world.
And I want to talk about, let's just go back to a traditional, well, not traditional, let's say a consumer products company that has embraced something like social media. Is what's is on your menu something that's complementary to that? And do they look at it in the same way as they do? I mean, obviously there are, if you go on Instagram, you'll see, you know, people with millions and millions of followers doing product placements. So are those companies saying, all right, you know, we've done plenty of that. Let's get some you know, some of what GameSquare offers in. Is it on their menu? And do they look at it the same?
I'll speak specifically to the FaZe Clan side first, and then I'll let them take the kind of the GameSquare broader picture. So in many of the games that we're in, we have, or in a few of the games we're in, we have digital items that brands can kind of participate on, and they actually go in game. So a game like Rocket League, for example, Nissan was a partner of ours, and they were on the side of our car. And so it's a typical, like, almost like being in a stadium kind of position. But they were there, and they're in perpetuity on that vehicle and that digital item. So kids are playing with that skin, and they're constantly kind of seeing that ad on the side of the car, or anybody that's basically going through. And so, yeah, I think the positive affinity of being around that brand. But it's going back to what I also said before in terms of there's only so many seats at the table. If you want to participate around Counter-Strike or around Call of Duty, there's only so many ways in. And so one of the things from a specific team perspective, right, to GameSquare, they can offer a more broad kind of reach. But for us specifically, it's, hey, do you want to access the table to the best teams in the world? This is where you're going to be seen, where you're going to be photographed, where kids are going to want to wear the jersey with your brand on it, and they're going to be rolling around. Everybody's going to be seeing it. Victory moments are going to be there. So if that's what you want, then that's what we're providing. That's very different than just serving an Instagram ad or serving a Twitter ad or anything like that. Because yes, you can go and buy those things, but you can't participate along the journey that we're kind of having and the full audience there for those big moments when the whole internet's tuned in to watch, win or loss in a championship.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Excuse me. What I would add to that, John, is that at the end of the day, what brands are looking for is audience targeting, right? Whether it happens on Instagram or whether it happens on TikTok or whether it happens on Twitch, I think is irrelevant, right? What they're interested in is how do I reach sort of that 18 to 35-year-old sort of demo? And how do I target them? And if it's targeting them through a gaming influencer that predominantly reaches 18 to 35-year-olds, I think sort of the brands, will gravitate right to a gaming influencer. If it's a general sort of social influencer that just happens to reach 18 to 35-year-olds, I think they're equally interested in sort of reaching those targeted audiences. We do a lot of demographic sort of overlays so that brands can actually see what the social downstream or the social circle of a particular influencer or creator is and how that maps right to their brand objectives.
Gotcha. I want to go back to Eric if I can for a second. Eric, something that I found really interesting was these wildly successful partnerships that you've done with Totino's and then Nike. And it amazed me that you could co-brand pizza. How much opportunity is there in that? Because those are some very, very famous brands. You're getting more and more exposure. It just seems like an exciting area for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, like where there's a will, there's a way. You can co-brand pretty much anything, right? Like I think the big part of it is it was just basically saying like you're trying to reach a new audience, right? And I think that what's nice about the FaZe brand specifically is that it has global reach, but it's massive in the United States as well. And so the brand is comfortable being in a lot of different places, and there's a lot of luckily partners that we found that want to take us out there. So one of our big partners, Steel Series, we're in Best Buy with them, with mouse and keyboard, headset, and mouse pad. And I think, with our energy drinks as well, like we've found a lot of open doors where people are like, hey, if we can get the FaZe brand in here in a place that doesn't necessarily make sense, like FaZe and 7-Eleven, there's a great way to do that. 7-Eleven's down, right? And so I think we've had the luxury basically with the brand being so big and being able to be in a lot of different places. And we're going to continue to look for the right fits for kind of what the founders and what the brand wants to do. Obviously there's certain things that probably don't make a lot of sense for us. But we're definitely going to go and keep kind of continuing down the way for stuff that we think is authentically in line with what our audience actually cares about, what they eat, what they drink, what they want to do, but also what our founders want to do, right? If our founders don't really like it, it doesn't really work. That's the thing about it. So it's like Totino's, yeah, they eat Totino's rolls, in between playing, right? They can go nuke that really quickly and then just hop back in and squat up really fast. So it's the same thing about how we try to approach a lot of those things with the brand.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Oh, by the way, gentlemen, some of these numbers I think are in your investor presentation, which people should check out. Just Google GameSquare investor presentation. But what's the total addressable market that we're looking at here? Well, for esports, for one, Eric, how many billions are we talking about?
Oh man, I'm not probably the best person to ask for that number, but I think it's a very, very large. Lou, what was that, like 3?
Yeah, I think so. I think in our investor deck, we have the addressable market as gamers globally as 3 billion.
Okay.
And then we have total revenue, right, within sort of game publishing at about 230 to 250 billion as well.
And I'll add something to that, which is kind of fascinating. So when you look at kind of wide range of gamers, everybody's always like, how is, I don't know, Mary age 50 a gamer? I think it was Candy Crush that recently just did a big competitive thing where people were actively trying to go and win. And I forget if they ended up at some location like a LAN, but they were competing to try to win in, I think it was Candy Crush, and specifically Go. And like that kind of competitive structure is really what that layer is. And again, Candy Crush isn't an esport classically, right? But if you're literally training or trying to be the best at it, then you can kind of continue to scale and go. And that's really where, people are still competing to try to break Tetris right now, which, by the way, if you get a chance to go on YouTube, there's some incredible videos about it. So, and that's, still competitive. That's still an esport title. Sports is everything from chess to Formula One racing, So it's a very wide range. And that's why the gaming market is just massive. And it's about finding that right product and then placing it on top of that right community.
Great. We touched on the Cowboys, but I just want to discuss it a little bit more. Largest investor is the Jones family office. You got Tom Walker on your board of directors, the CFO. I'm curious, with that experience that Jerry Jones has had, with that franchise becoming the most valuable one on the planet, is there any wisdom that he can share with you guys about how to, harness the value of esports teams and so forth? Justin, you want to come back in?
Yeah. Look, I think there's a lot of value that can be extracted from the Jones family and the Cowboys more broadly, right? They're a family-run business in a domestic sport that's the most valuable sporting organization in the world. So I think the way that they've been able to grow that brand and license the star, there's a lot of correlations and a lot to take from that. So yeah, we have a great relationship with the Jones family. You mentioned Tom Walker being on our board. He's also the head of our audit committee. I'm actually heading to a couple of meetings at the Cowboys headquarters today. We are very lucky to have them as a real resource and have real access. As part of that deal, we actually have an agency of record deal with the Cowboys. So our full service agency actually work on the Cowboys gaming and esports strategy, and we're building out what we think can be really a blueprint for a lot of other sporting teams across the world. And helping them build out a strategy to really access, their next generation of season ticket holders. So we have a program. It was year one last year, wildly successful. It was sort of profitable from the get-go, called Cowboys Game Time, where we produce different tournaments and events for gaming fans, Cowboys fans, and we're really going to grow and expand that this year. So very exciting. But yeah, I mean, a lot to learn from the Cowboys in terms of a brand and the ability to really, license and grow that. We draw a lot of correlations when it comes to FaZe Clan. I really think about FaZe Clan specifically in the esports category as really being, the Dallas Cowboy of esports. But as Eric reminds me, hopefully winning a few more championships than the Cowboys are currently.
Uh-oh. Justin, let's talk about numbers for a second here. Impressive projection for this year, over $100 million in revenue. That growth is just unbelievable from a few years ago. What about cash flow? And I believe you are expecting to become cash flow positive in the next few quarters. But after that, does the business scale well? It feels like you could have operating leverage without having to inject a ton more capital into growth.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So this isn't about kind of hitting, profitability and ticking that box. It's we get to profitability and can really scale. There's no secret that being a public company in the micro cap space, like we touched on before, not only has it been sort of challenging with a number of headwinds, but I mean it's expensive. It's expensive to be a public company, and so getting to scale is really important to us. We're well and truly on the way. We're now sort of well capitalized. We're sort of solidifying that balance sheet. Obviously, the recent transaction with FaZe Media bringing in additional $11 million to capital. That FaZe Media portion of the business was kind of the highest cash burning part of our business. So, while we are really getting that under control and towards profitability, it's also now fully funded. So that really helps. But yeah, look, we make no secrets of the fact that we are aggressively pursuing profitability. We think that we have a really compelling story. We think that there's, real value if you look at multiples currently in market. But, I think gone are the days of just having a sexy story. We understand that we need to get to cash flow positivity, and we're aggressively pursuing it. We think we can be there by the end of the year. And then to your point, really scale with real operating leverage from there.
Great. Now we talked a lot about the U.S. We touched on some overseas markets. Which are the most important for GameSquare or in this world in general outside of the U.S.?
Yeah, look, we're a global business. We have our influencer agency over in the UK and servicing a lot of Europe. Our esports team, Counter-Strike, for example, they're based in Europe and really sort of heavily audience skews into that market. So there's a lot of opportunities there for us. There's a lot of opportunities in Asia. This really is a global digital space. But I would say that we are getting our model right in North America first before trying to be too much to too many. I think that we're really proving out this end-to-end platform here in North America. It's where the lion's share of our revenue is from, but then really gives us the opportunity to scale that into new markets. Looking at media growth probably throughout Europe, to go in with our agency and managed services businesses over there. But yeah, from an esports perspective, I can let Eric touch on that. But there's a lot of opportunities for growth. There's a lot going on over in the Middle East currently with the Esports World Cup coming up, and a huge amount of dollars being invested there. And look, there's a lot of opportunity throughout Asia as well as we continue to grow. But a focus for us, more specifically on the media agency data tech side of the business, is let's really get things right in North America, get to profitability, and then look for global scale. Esports is a little different. So I don't know, Eric, if you want to touch on that at all.
Yeah, just really briefly, it's very game dependent, and there's certain markets that are extremely robust and supportive esports. So like Brazil is a specific example, and right now for us, Rainbow Six is relevant, but it's going to really depend on the games. Counter-Strike is also really big in Brazil, questions on what we can do to scale there in the near term. But I think mid and long term, there's a lot of stuff to do there. Southeast Asia is another one where it's weird though, because there's a very big wall between North America and what we do there. But to Justin's point, if we can perfect some things here, it's really, there's a massive hunger out there, specifically Indonesia and Thailand. And then, as he mentioned, the Middle East is investing very heavily in the longevity of esports infrastructure. So that's going to be an interesting place. But yeah, as it stands for our current games, it's US, UK, Germany, France, kind of the typical ones are like very good markets for a lot of those things and drive the most kind of engagement or purchasing.
Great. Now, you don't have to give me specific numbers on this, guys, but I'm curious, how much can these influencers or gamers earn? I mean, you see someone do a product placement on Instagram and get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. Is it getting to that level?
I don't know who wants to tackle this one. I mean, it's a lot. I'll say this much right now. It kind of depends on what marketplaces you're willing to kind of get into too, right? There are moments when all the digital platforms, the streaming platforms were fighting, and there were some very big contracts signed in that period of time. The betting marketplace is really frothy right now. And so there's some very large deals that are being currently cut. I think probably the smallest they're going to be, personally. I think they're long-term going to be massive. And you're going to start seeing them in the traditional sports space even bigger. So like, it's really a question of how much does the streamer, does the creator understand their own audience and is willing to actually double down in that, or how much they're willing to kind of take the bag and go the direction of whatever that is. But it's multi-millions of dollars. And I don't really think there's a ceiling personally. I think it's more of a question of who's willing to put that money down. A few years ago, there were $200 million deals being talked around, multi-year $200 million deals, but they're out there, So anyway, that's more of an anecdotal though.
Gotcha. By the way, you were talking about how you might have a 50-year-old female who turns out to be a gamer, which might surprise people, but globally, does the mix skew more male?
Oh, I mean, I can answer that one too. Actually, globally, it skews more female.
Wow.
Domestically, I think it skews more male. There is actually a game ecosystem called Mobile Legends Bang Bang, and MLBB, because it's a kind of a silly title. And it's a MOBA game, which means it's a game similar to League of Legends, right? And its biggest ecosystem is Indonesia. And they have a women's and a men's league, and the women's league gets higher viewership than a majority of esports titles around the world. And I think they're close to 50-50. I'm not 100% on that statistic, but they have a very, very large female audience that not only engages and plays the game, but watches the competitive. And so, again, I think as you get around the world, it actually starts to balance out more. Definitely in Asia, where it's a bigger part of youth culture from like both sides. And then I think, the States is we're behind, but I think we'll catch up. I think when you increase it more broadly to general gaming, it's pretty evenly split. But I think in esports specifically, it's definitely skewed more male domestically. But yeah, internationally, I think it's closer to 50-50.
Gotcha. We're running out of time here, but Lou, I want to ask you, since we last spoke to you on our show a couple of years ago, the company's changed quite a bit through M&A and some divestitures too. Is there more of that to come, or are you guys, looking about how you want to look and you're going to try to focus on organic stuff for a while here?
Well, I mean, we're always sort of keeping our eyes open, to other creative sort of acquisitions that help us sort of accelerate sort of our near, mid, and longer sort of term plan. So I wouldn't say we're done, but we're certainly sort of digesting sort of this latest sort of acquisition with FaZe, which has been a great asset for us. And at the same time, we've been very opportunistic about peeling away and divesting assets within the portfolio that are just not sort of core, where, the markets may not be sort of fully representing sort of our current sort of value. Being able to transact at a better valuation than the market sort of attributing to our assets has been sort of an opportunity for us to deliver non-dilutive capital, right, to shareholders, which we'll continue to do. So I would say we're not done. I think we have sort of M&A sort of in our DNA, but we're going to be sort of highly selective at any transaction that we do from this point forward.
All right, great. Justin, I want to bring you back in for the last word. Justin, obviously, as we just talked about with Lou, a lot of change in the company the last year or two. What are you most excited about right now, having already accomplished all this and gotten the company to where you are? So looking out into the back half of 2024.
Yeah, I think Lou mentioned it, where heads down, really integrating in FaZe. I think there's a lot of excitement around that. We recently announced FaZe Media, which I touched on briefly before, but I think the opportunities of growth within FaZe Media, the opportunities of growth within FaZe Esports and what's happening over in the Middle East with the Esports World Cup kicking off shortly, a lot of excitement around that, the continued growth of our agency business. So I think just really showing the success of that integration. We've been pulling out a lot of costs, but when you're a public company, you're always a little behind in being able to show the market the improvement that you're making. So excited for that, for the back half of the year to continue revenue growth and really post up some numbers and show the market really what we're up to. So yeah, very very excited by that, and hopefully we get a bit of relief with the market and some less headwinds. So really see some blue skies ahead with our growth.
All right, great. Well, we're going to leave it there, gentlemen. Lou, Justin, Eric, this has been terrific. Thank you, everyone who watched and asked questions. Finally, you can check out a replay. The easiest place to find it is to go to our homepage, ipo-edge.com, or look up the game ticker on Yahoo Finance or on your Bloomberg terminal. With that, I'm John Jannero of IPO Edge signing off. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us.